So I'm going to give an update on where we're at with the flagship. This has been fun to put together in a way because this has always felt like it was 100 miles away. And now it's starting to come into kind of more focus. And I'm really excited about the things that are happening. And I think we have a long way to go, but I think we're making a great start. And it's exciting to see the beginnings of things that we're organizing. I'm not going to talk much about results because they would be technical and you couldn't really do it in 20 minutes. So I'm going to kind of overview things and not try to get into some of the details of the science, but it's tremendously exciting to me right now that the science is happening in my lab and collaborating with the other folks in this flagship and in other flagships. So let's see. Okay, so here we are. Resilience in Species and Ecosystems is our flagship. And that's myself, Preston Wilson from the School of Engineering, who is an acoustician. Shalini Jha from Integrated Biology, like myself, and CNS is a pollination and urban ecologist. And Tony DeFiore's works in Latin America on primates and many other interesting topics. And it's a really fun group of people, interesting different perspectives and different kinds of things. And I want to share a few of what we've been up to. So where our sort of tagline when we were doing the work plan asked us to come up with a tagline, and we came up with we uncover and share knowledge necessary for a sustainable planet. So that's sort of the grand challenge, and within that we're starting to make steps forward. And there are other folks involved that I won't have time to go into in this talk, but there are lots of collaborators and players in this project. Okay, so everybody's quite familiar with this, but the context of what we are interested in with regard to sustainability has a great deal to do with sustained chronic stressors like increasing temperature, as well as acute, rapid extreme events. And both of these are becoming important. We're seeing changes in climate, but along with that, and you're familiar with many examples in the press and your own life, but across Texas we see this imprint of changing climate, and it's altering the way that species operate in landscapes, the way they interact with other species and form communities, and ultimately ecosystems. And the resilience of those ecosystems is very much tied into issues of biodiversity and ecology and evolutionary biology of plants and animals. And so we take this perspective and want to understand how things are changing, and can we understand why they're changing in the way they are? Could we then predict how they're changing? Could we use that information to inform policy? So one of the things that I like to think about in climate change, and is that we know about non-analog climates. That is, climate is very high dimensional and multivariate, and there are combinations of temperature and precipitation that exist now that didn't exist even 50 years ago. And if you go back further and further in time, you find even more examples of sort of what were normal then, but we would consider weird climates now. And so we're going into climates that don't seem normal to us, and they're weird because they're combinations of things. And plants and animals and the cascading effects of their interactions and so on are all influenced by this multivariate thing. So, changing just temperature alone, it may not have the same impact as changing both temperature and humidity and many, many other factors. And so this non-analog climates maybe lead to non-analog ecosystems that are assemblages of species that we have not seen in the past, and they may have very different dynamics and consequences for resilience. And so underlying a lot of this is is the idea that ecosystems provide services to humanity, and sustainable and resilient ecosystems benefit us. And so this is a powerful motivation to understand that. In the same context, there's our environments that we build and modify for agriculture and habitation and industry and so on. And so that's another factor. It's overlaid on all of this this climate dynamics. And so I think that's a super important, and we really want to look at the consequences of what we're doing in modifying landscapes and fit these together. And that's one of the exciting things I think about the larger PT 2050 is having researchers that are urban ecologists, urban planners, people that are doing water dynamics, but integrating people in many ways into what they're doing. And so I like to show this picture. It's South Texas because I like to go birding down there, and I take students down there birding. But you can just see a sort of this crazy mosaic of habitats, and all of this change is occurring. And we don't really have a strong basis in theory to predict how communities would shift in this kind of a complex spatial mosaic. So there's all kinds of urbanization. There's little pockets of tropical, subtropical forests along the Rio Grande down here, and a unique set of bird species that I'm very interested in. And so, how those shift, will we have the same bird species? Will people continue to come to the valley to spend ecotourism dollars to see those species? Will that cascade into agricultural productivity and so on and so on, right? There are lots of effects that we can imagine. And so we get into this sort of idea of out of the tropics, and this is one of the topics in my lab. We've been working with a particular species. We're sort of using data on many species, but we've been actually going out and marking and taking some tissue samples for blood samples for genetic sequencing. It's the green jays. And this species, you can see on this map, used to only inhabit South Texas at the very bottom of this map, and now it has a very wide distribution. And like these orange dots are where we've captured in these birds. I'm going to do resequencing, but I just want to illustrate the idea of out of the tropics. That is, there's a whole host of things that happen as climate changes. Neglected tropical diseases, dengue, and other things are moving and may become more prevalent. We're seeing not only shifts in the range of the bird species, but huge growth in the populations of some of these tropical associated species. And maybe that's also going to be true of disease vectors and other things at the same time. So that's really important. So basically, a lot of what we've been talking about and working on is kind of this question of how can we acquire the data needed for more resilient Texas landscapes, that is to inform models and to make actionable intelligence. And so that involves geospatial analysis, in situ sensing, and a lot of modeling I won't go into, but it's been quite exciting in terms of the progress and kind of methods that we've been working on. And so the sensing business is sort of the big vision of this is that, if we can have autonomous sensors everywhere recording sound, climate, maybe pollution, video, all kinds of things in large arrays across an entire state, say of Texas, right? Tens of thousands of these things. We'd have this kind of observatory, if you will, or sort of this near real-time information stream for which we could greatly benefit. And so that's the big vision. And so rolling that out is quite a big effort, but we're getting started on some parts of that. So recent activities, we've been have some fun kind of cross collaboration across flagships, doing a lot of work on sensors and bioacoustical analysis, and some work on species range. So this is one, we've worked with the AIM group quite a lot. That's another project, a flagship, that's using artificial intelligence to inform models. And so our sensing work came out of this collaboration with Suzanne and Jamie and now Katie. And so we're working together on this, and they've been very interested in soil moisture sensors, but we're working on joint deployments where they will be doing sort of several kinds of sensing, bioacoustic and other things. And we just submitted a little Hook Fellowship application to fund some students to do work in the county's Canyonlands Preserve, and then we'd like to expand on this work in around Central Texas and South Texas. There's some collaborators down in UTRGV that we have and the AIM project has. And so this has been fun and interesting, and I think will lead to neat stuff. So when Shalini came in, she brought a real host of kind of projects and ideas about urban ecology and her work in pollinators, and that's been great. And so while we were ramping up, we've been funding some work like by Deidre Zoll, who's involved with the Texas Metro Observatory, I think Catherine Liebernick's group, and collaborating with Amy Belair. So we've used some of our flagship funding to kind of further this work and in several dimensions, but it's leading to some neat stuff. That there's in this ongoing project in Waller Creek. It's an urban ecology project, and Deidre is going to be working using some of our resources to pull that data together. So they've been monitoring biodiversity, habitat quality, and other things along Waller Creek, which runs through from the campus down to the lake here in Austin. It's involved all kinds of students and other folks collecting data and some sensing, bioacoustic and other kinds of sensing. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing some results from that. Shalini is kind of running now the science out at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and so that's a really neat opportunity in several ways. And we funded a grad student, and she's gone and collected all of the history of research done on the site. It was never assembled in any kind of cohesive picture, and that's going to become outreach material so that those people coming to the Wildflower Center will know that UT researchers and other researchers have been out there doing work for 20 or more years in many kinds of things, in land management for invasive species, soil, carbon kinds of things, green roofs. I mean, just a ton of stuff's gone on out there, and it's sort of flown below the radar. So I was really glad we could fund that. And we're also working on, there's some soil sensing going on out there, sensors out at LBJ, and we'd like to expand that network a lot. We're working on this idea where we'll pull that sensor data onto a dashboard, and as people come into the Wildflower Center, they'll see data that's been collected over recent days or weeks or months, and see that we have this capacity to monitor and better understand these ecosystems. So I think that's a really neat kind of connection between the technology and the kind of joining with the public to sort of look at these data and try to better understand what's going on. So in the sensing area, it's been a really fun, I put out an advertisement and, on campus for do-it-yourself environmental sensing project. I immediately got a bunch of engineering students and computer science students. We have a few biologists in the bunch, but it's been a real mix of students that are all excellent and really excited. And they come in and we buy these parts, little Raspberry Pi computers and other kinds of things, and they're putting these together and they're writing software to program them. We're working with Jamie, TAC, and the AIM group, and so that's kind of a joint collaboration with the other flagship. But we're now streaming data, bioacoustic data, to TAC, and we're doing. We have some undergrads working on machine learning, which is great. That's the other part of the side. So we imagine we're pulling in these data like bioacoustic data, sound, and we're running them through these very powerful pipelines that can classify and otherwise analyze data. And so one of the things that we have a student here is working on a machine learning pipeline to remove voice and semantic content from recordings. We have some situations where the location of the sensors are a little sensitive, and so we don't want to hear what people are saying. We just want to know that somebody is speaking in the environment. So we can use machine learning to just strip out and replace the voice with a constant tone. So we'll know somebody was talking, but we won't know what was said. This has been really, really fun, and a lot of activity going on in the lab. And I hope, in the future, we'll have some open houses and get a lot of people to come in and see what the students are doing. So if we can build these, more and more of them, then we can sort of move an inch towards that big vision of having, you know, many dozens, hundreds, I don't know, maybe someday there'll be a big effort of thousands or whole continental scale kind of sensor networks. We've been working a lot with bioacoustics, and I don't have time to go into a lot of details. Golden cheek warbler data that Preston, one of the flagship leads, has been working with, and so they had set out this design and collected lots of sound data, but needed some bioacoustic knowledge and ecological knowledge. So we've been working together with that, and involved some folks from City Austin, some folks from St. Ed's University, and it's been really fun. And you know, we get to look at kind of behavioral issues or different kinds of songs. So that's like an A song variant and a B song variant of the. They use these songs in different behavioral modes. So depending on they're setting up a nest, or they're potentially calling to a rival male, or pair bonding, calling to the female, and so that we see consistent patterns throughout the season of shift in the frequency of these songs and so on. And so that's yielding some really neat results. And we're also doing some work on kind of how much anthropogenic sounds coming from roads or leaf blowers, lawnmowers, every kind of sound that are impinging on these little preserves around the edge of Austin, you know, motorcycle running around on trails, are they impacting these birds? And this large data set will help us understand that. So that's another kind of interesting facet of this sensing. If we can get these long-term monitoring data, we can both, you know, identify what bird species, frog species, other insects, maybe other things that are happening, but we can hear sounds of wind, rain, you know, human activity and other things, and integrate that, and ultimately ingest those into models that may be useful for forecasting. We funded a project with Preston does a lot of underwater acoustics. So we've got kind of the first ever, I think, paired below and above water sensors for sound, and they've been testing this out, and this is some of the data that come out, and it's already yielding some interesting results. It's a very interesting project down there in the Laguna Madre, Port Aransas down to Boca Chica, and they are actually listening to seagrass ecosystems and gauging their health through sound, which is quite an interesting thing. And so that's another kind of dimension of this sensing, and that we can relate these sort of technological streams and analyses back to resilience and ecosystem health. This is ongoing work. Just mentioned, we're doing a lot with species range distribution modeling, and this kind of out of the tropics issue, and so there's some pretty technical kind of modeling stuff I won't go into. It's really exciting and emerging from this, and we're starting to do genetic resequencing. But through these kinds of examples, I think, and connecting places that our ranges are expanding to places where the species has been there for a long time, we may be able to tease out some of the interesting dynamics that relate to sustainability of those populations and how they may be evolving in response to climate change. And I have another project that's kind of started a little independently of PG 2050, but it's also sound-based, soundscapes and sound sensing, and it involves Mongolian pastoralist societies. And so many of these threads are kind of coming together into a picture. And I think it's really exciting to think beyond Texas in a comparative way, right? So these pastoralists are managing livestock, so there's a lot of similarities to Texas, and then we have these tropical systems in Mexico and in Ecuador where Tony and I work and Sean A works, and so I think all together this is kind of a fun and exciting set of things that are finding a lot of cross-pollination, and sort of some of the tools that we're developing in one context are really assisting the science and the action potential in other kinds of systems. And we're, we've been into sound and storytelling, so Adam and SOAR project's been interested in natural sounds in the environment to use in maybe a listening booth kind of context. And we were just through PT20 contact set this up. We've talked to Dorothy recently, is doing a dance performance, and they're going to potentially integrate some of the acoustics that we have acquired into that performance. They're very keen on kind of the environmental change perspective and how sort of soundscapes and other aspects of the environment are changing as we build and as we convert landscape, and we're constantly growing and expanding in this area. So thanks for listening. That was just a quick overview of a lot of things that are going on without a lot of technical details, but if anyone is interested in some of the sort of model statistics and all the other kinds of machine learning things we're doing, I'm happy to meet with them and talk about that.